Welcome to Truth, Money, and Freedom, where we discuss everything about truth, money, and freedom with your hosts, Timmy Chonga and Dell, coming to you from our Discord server, also named Truth, Money, and Freedom. An invite to our Discord platform is linked below in the description for anyone to join in on the conversation. Today we welcome internet sensation Chris Duane, who is the owner of the Silvershield group that creates mini mintages of silver rounds and has provided many educational and informational videos about silver on YouTube. Chris has been interviewed many times on many platforms and has his own successful YouTube channel called Truth Never Told, also linked below in the description. And we're pleased to have him with us today. Thank you for joining us, Chris. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into physical silver stacking?
Oh, geez. Yeah, I came into physical silver, I think, in a much different way than I think the average stacker does. A lot of stackers come into it because, their grandfathers or, parents collected coins and, maybe of a novelty level. And then there's other people who come at this saying, the Wall Street system is rigged and, I want real money, or constitutionalists come into it saying, hey, the dollar is legally defined by silver, 371.2 grains of fine silver. And now we have these debt notes out there. Screw the man type thing. I came at it from I woke up, 30 some odd years old, a millionaire making tons of money and saying, how, why, I didn't even know what really I had earned, I have a very successful business. I worked very hard for it. My parents did. They literally bet everything on their business and it paid off after a couple of years. And then, all of a sudden I saw more money than most people would ever hope to see. And instead of what I think most Americans would do in that situation of going, hey, now I can go buy the fancy car. Hey, I'm going to go have fancy vacations. Hey, big house. Hey, I'm going to have, nice colleges on the back of my, car for kids. I was like, what is all this? How come I got to this level and, why doesn't everybody else? And the scary truth of the matter is that I got there because I created debt, and I created millions of dollars worth of debt on a monthly basis. And I got first crack at all the profits of all that debt that was created. And when I, came to understand that, I'm like, well, this doesn't quite make sense. Dollars aren't they, printed by the government? And then I came to find out that the Federal Reserve is actually printing these things and that they're debt notes, and that actually the creation of our money in our system is completely rigged from the birth. The original sin is the way that we have debt money. And that blew my mind. If people really wrap their mind around how horribly rigged our system is, how much human potential has been hijacked simply because our money is debt, I think it gives us an understanding of just how unbalanced this world is right now. So when I realized that when debt is created, money is created. When debt is paid off, money is destroyed. So the fact is that I created millions of dollars worth of debt, which produced millions of dollars worth of new money entering the economy. And that when you understand that the only way that the debt can be paid back is for more debt to be taken out. And what's worse is that there's interest on every single bed of debt that comes into this world that does not exist. In fact, the very fundamentals of it demands that there must be more debt in every year on a global societal basis than the debt and interest accrued the year before, or what? The whole system falls apart. Mm-hmm. So we've gone through generations now of this system that has morphed into this. It wasn't always like this. Even when the Federal Reserve was established in 1913, there was still gold and silver physically in our money. There was gold coins and silver coins out there. And then they had gold and silver certificates and, maybe treasury banknotes and stuff like that. It's taken time for the Federal Reserve note, for what, it has been, to expand. And even that has changed because we were on a gold standard and then we took it off. Roosevelt, took us off domestically. Everybody brought in their gold and got paid gold, the fair market value for gold back during the Great Depression. The gold was never confiscated. That's one thing. Oh, why buy it if the government never confiscated? They paid fair value for it at the time. The real thievery came when they devalued the gold or devalue the dollar against the gold and raise the price of gold, I think up 70-80% overnight after they had already taken all the gold.
Yeah, right after they got done
was a real
confiscating.
thievery.
Yep.
And then we go through for a little bit further down the line, and then you start seeing all these other nations. You look at I think Francois Mitterrand, or one of the French leaders, talking about how the United States has an unfair advantage. They can print up all these dollars, and they're treated as if they were good as gold. But they're like, there's no way they're spending all this money on guns and butter in Vietnam and all these social projects, and that there's actually gold behind it. So the French said, hey, here's all these dollars that we earned in trade. We want gold back. Well, Nixon got to the point where I'm sure at some point they were like, yo, we're almost out of gold. And we got to cut back with this, because there was all these dollars floating all over the world, but there was very limited amount of gold, which is the basis of that. So Nixon took us off the international gold standard. And since then, it's really just been this illusion that we pass around, these digital illusions of wealth in exchange for real good and real services and real careers and real lives, all passing around these things. And now, after that, they said, well, we have to have some sort of basis for making people, keep these dollars. And domestically, it's easy. You got taxes that need to be paid only in dollars, bills, corporations, salaries, everything demands that you have to use the dollar. Or else, you could potentially end up in jail or having assets seized or whatever. So domestically, it's kind of easy to force a fake currency. That's what fiat is. It's like by lawful demand, you have to accept this. But internationally, you don't have that. And that's what the French proved, that you could, say, hey, we don't have to accept these dollars. We can exchange it back for gold. So they came up, and this is conspiracy. I have no way of proving it. But I've read many articles that Henry Kissinger formulated the plot to create the oil shocks in the 70s, not to, have the Muslims say, oh, the United States is a great Satan, but to raise the price of oil, which the oil companies and the Middle East countries would benefit off of a massive rise in the value of oil, and effectively gave backing to the petrodollar. Meaning that all these Muslim nations that said, hey, the great Satan, of the United States, we're going to embargo and withhold oil from the market and to punish the great Satan, then why would they demand that you have to be paid in dollars? Like, doesn't make sense. And when you get down to the basic understanding of how the petrodollar system works, is that they raise the price of the oil, and basically forced all the world to use dollars in order to buy that oil. So it gave this international, reasoning behind it, and that's lasted for a long time. Yeah, and that's lasted for a long time. And now it's starting to fall apart, because now this country is spending more money on a yearly basis than entire generations. I mean, hundreds of years of the United States, and we didn't rack up as much debt as we've done this past year under a supposedly conservative Trump. I think the estimate now is that we're going to run a $1.4 trillion deficit. Well, that was
in fiscal 2019, correct? I just saw that article.
That's more than all the federal debt prior to Reagan coming into office. The entire federal debt from 1776 to 1980 was under $1 trillion. And now we're spending that on a yearly basis like it's nothing, and everybody thinks the party's going to last forever.
Yep.
So I looked at this whole system and said, this is going to be the single largest event in human history.
Yep. No,
because
I
the
agree
damage
with you.
that happens when Enron, Madoff, Goods, we see that. We got a taste of it in 2008, but the big one is still coming, because 2008 was an institutional crisis. A few bad banks made a few bad bets on a few bad housing markets and screwed over a few pensions.
Yep.
And if I don't
not to mention Bear
remember
Stearns.
what it felt like back in 2008, the world was going to fall apart. What happens to our jobs? What happens to the bank? What happens to our government? Are we going to have anarchy? Are we going to have a police state? What's going to happen? And I looked at that and I said, you know what? Nothing got fixed in 2008. And this whole dream that we've had of this past decade is going to make things even worse. And it made all the reasoning why I got into physical silver back in 2005 magnitudes more. And that's why I've been reaching out to people saying, hey, this is a very unique little asset that is been hidden from humanity and is vital. Like throughout all human history, silver has been used as money in all cultures throughout all time. In fact, many of the Romance languages, silver and money are synonymous. And yet now we've been deprived of it. We've enabled these psychopath, cunning men who profit off of this system knowingly and have destroyed, I think, and hijacked a great amount of human potential into a debt and death and consumer paradigm. Totally unsustainable, totally immoral, and yet that's what passes for it. And I'm saying that at some point it's going to end. The illusions of all these worlds out there that have been sustained with trillion-dollar companies, of consumerism, these fake trillion-dollar wars, this media. I mean, literally everything's fake. Your medicine, your media, your government, your money, everything is fake, and it's been built up off of this original sin of debt as money. And I think silver is the cure for that.
Yep, we definitely are living in an illusion. There's no doubt about it. And I'm glad you brought up the article. It's very recent that basically Trump is going to add 1.4 trillion, to the debt in fiscal 2019. That should speak volumes, folks. I mean, that's pretty dangerous stuff there.
This is during an economy that's supposedly
awesome. Correct. Exactly.
What happens when we get the next crisis?
Yep.
What happens to the tax receipts? What happens to the implied liability of the taxpayers? Okay, it's whatever you felt in 2008. It is going to be magnitudes more this next time. Magnitudes, and I don't think the system survives. That's why I stack silver, because it will transfer your wealth from this paradigm and into the next paradigm. Like, I'm not interested in. I was talking to somebody about the difference with cryptos and all this other stuff. I said, I'm not interested in building up the perceived value of silver so that I can sell my silver and go buy Lamborghinis and, go do cocaine in Vegas. Like, that's not what this is. This is understanding that the entire world is fake, a global, generational, debt-based, digital illusion, fiat Ponzi scheme. Okay? That's what all this is. And that silver is the realest thing with no counterparty risk. It's vital to our way of life. Like, it's the second most versatile commodity in the world next to oil. So when I tell people, like, can you imagine our world without oil? I mean, think about how prevalent plastics, oil, all this stuff is.
Medicine.
Like, it wouldn't exist.
Yep.
Well, silver is the second most one. You cannot live this current lifestyle without silver. And yet it's a rare, depleting asset, one that's been used and abused for over 100 years as a disposable, like it's aluminum. And it's rare. It's only 9 times more prevalent than gold. And yet gold doesn't have anywhere near the industrial uses of silver. And yet we treat it as if it's worthless. Gold and silver, the ratio, I think, is 1 to 81. 1 ounce of gold will buy you 81 ounces of silver. It only comes out of the ground 9 times. So I think regardless what happens to the price of gold, silver must, just to get to the natural ratio, get back to a 1 to 9 ratio, which means that silver will go up 9 times more than whatever price gold will go up if we get back to a natural ratio. And then the really sick thing that bends my mind is that throughout all of human history, gold has been treasured and stored as a rare and precious metal, valuable, so that all the gold in the world, for all intents and purposes, has been stored and secured. And yet all the silver that we've had throughout all of human history has been used and abused and thrown away in so many consumer goods and in such small quantities, because the uses of silver are so small that it'll never be recycled, and we're throwing it away. And that the real above ground stocks, real tangible things, if you added up all that, there's 6 times an estimated 6 billion ounces of gold above ground, and yet there's only an estimated verifiable between 1 and 2 billion ounces of silver above ground, meaning that silver should be at least 2 to 3 times more valuable than gold.
Yep. In fact,
that's just the ratio between there. Think about how much global debt has gone up since 1980. Global debt has gone up 24 times since 1980. Well, silver was valued at $50 in 1980 during that inflationary crisis. 24 times that price now is well over $1,000 silver. And yet here we are at $14 silver. Can anybody explain that if not criminal manipulation at the highest levels to keep humanity away from the one thing that would upset their debt and death and consumer system?
Yep, that reminds me of a question I'm going to ask you in a little bit about palladium. But actually, you segue perfectly into the next topic, which is silver fundamentals. The fundamentals of silver, mining, as well as the supply and demand and the ratio of, basically gold to silver, which has clearly been messed with in a very big way. And now the mining aspect of silver is interesting to me because I listen to the Morgan report from time to time. And David Morgan put out a report, I believe it was in December of 2016, that the aggregate cost of mining an ounce of silver for the primary miners was right around $16 an ounce. Yet we're below that right now. And so I don't know how much longer they can hold it at these levels. I mean, these mines will go out of business, won't they?
Yeah. And so yeah. I made there was a chart in a study, and it was the United States Geological Survey, and I think it was 2007, that basically said that if they added up all the estimated reserves of silver still underground, that there was, it's anywhere between, I think, 14 and 21 years from 2007 of mineable silver there. And I was like, oh my God, like, you're telling me, like, I mean, this is now, we're within eyesight. I'm certainly within a decade of saying, hey, there's no more silver that we can even mine at the $12 to $14 level or $16 level. And when I asked them, I said, how is that even possible? You can't literally mine it out of existence. And the person wrote back, said, no, but what will have to happen is a massive revaluation of silver so that it either encourages more mining of unproducible silver, much in the same way that we spend so much more money mining gold miles down, a much more difficult complex. And most silver is only found at the surface. So you would need to have a massive revaluation of silver to bring about more investment into mining silver. And it has another factor of providing wiser use of silver. So maybe we'll stop using thousands of tons of silver to make yoga pants less sweaty and smelly for, very wealthy women. Maybe we'll stop throwing this precious metal away so that they don't have sweaty pants,
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Maybe then we'll start using it for, renewable energy so that we stop having $1 trillion wars in the Middle East. Like, all the money that we spent fighting some wars that don't even exist. There was never any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It was a complete lie. And yet we've been there for years. In Afghanistan, the same thing. With all that trillions of dollars, they could have easily spent that and had completely sustainable energy. And we'd have no need for any foreign wars and have a much sustainable, real economy underneath it. But that's not what they want. The people at the top of the power want debt and death. They profit off of it. And we're enabling them by allowing that to happen. So I view silver as a rebellion, saying, hey, it's a short on all these digital illusions of wealth that will eventually go to zero. At some point, all these things, countries go to zero, they come out of existence, corporations go bankrupt, the technology change, somebody else comes in, innovators make them go away. Almost every single fiat currency in the world eventually goes to zero, okay? The only thing that I know throughout all time in history, and that will be around hundreds and thousands of years from now, is silver. And I view it as a form of rebellion, saying, hey, I don't support these guys anymore. I'm consciously awake. I'm going to withdraw my wealth out of the system, and I'm going to consciously preserve it, not to, to somehow make more money one day, but to actually preserve it. Instead of having instant gratification, which this world thrives off of, I'm going to have a way of withholding that and saving for a better day. And that's why I love there's so many different factors of getting into silver. You can look at it from the economics, the historics. I can get spiritual about it. I can, talk about it in technological uses. It really is a nexus point, and I think very vital to human existence. And one, I think that the abuse is going to lead to some sort of ramification, whether it's the mining, that they no longer be able to produce it, or what I've been just waiting for, the inevitability of this mathematical, unsustainable, debt-based, global, generational fiat Ponzi scheme coming to a head somewhere along the line.
Yep, and I'll tell you what, I got to tell you, I got a gut feeling that they're trying to bankrupt the primary miners, so the banks can now own the mines. If they don't already through loans. Yeah, gotcha.
I did a video about that, talking about how JP Morgan has gone from crashed JP Morgan. So maybe the younger stackers don't really remember, but back in like 2010, 2011, there was a pretty big movement of buy silver, crash JP Morgan, because JP Morgan took over Bear Stearns, who was short physical silver. And I think it was March 17th of 2008, or no, I don't remember. Yeah, it must have been 2008. Way before the financial crisis, months before the financial crisis, Bear Stearns was short physical silver, and silver had risen, essentially from $7 to $21, and it peaked at $21 on that St. Patrick's Day, and that's the same day that Bear Stearns went broke. And the Federal Reserve brokered a deal for JP Morgan to buy Bear Stearns, this titanic bank that has been around for hundreds of years on Wall Street, that had billions of dollars worth of capital and probably trillions of assets under capital, under management. And the Federal Reserve, this privately owned bank, brokered a deal that JP Morgan could go buy Bear Stearns for $2 a share.
Yep.
So wouldn't it make sense if you're JP Morgan to maybe drive up the price of silver, knowing that your main competitor is broke or short it, and then when panic and reality sets in, have your buddies at the Federal Reserve broker a deal, and now you own Bear Stearns, and now you own the silver short.
Yep.
So then JP Morgan takes over Bear Stearns, all their assets, clients, essentially like a pirate coming in saying, ha, you're ours. Then they have this silver short position. So, while I was drinking happily on St. Patrick's Day in 2008, watching silver go up to $21, I was so excited, I was right. It is undervalued. I then watched it for the next, 5 or 6 months get decimated, because now JP Morgan's now using all their same tactics to then crush silver from $21 down to $8 just prior, like literally days, to the financial crisis hitting its head, where silver should be in its glory day with all this trouble that's going on in these banks. Nobody trusts the banks, the currency. You would think that people would naturally want to go back into metals and do that. They crashed it before then. And then right when the financial crisis happened and we started to announce billion-dollar bailouts and trillion-dollar QEs and all this other stuff where they were going to float trillions of more fiat digital illusions of wealth out there that would give an inflationary and investment demand into silver. Silver then rose from the bottom of 8 at the financial crisis and rose steadily to 50. And that's when, during that time period of going up, the idea on the street was that JP Morgan was short silver, and that if we all got together and bought enough silver, that we would bankrupt JP Morgan, and then the price of silver would be liberated from all this manipulation, and we'd have glory days, right? Yep. Well, that didn't happen. Silver got to close to 50, and it was May 1st, 2011, and it was the same day that they supposedly got Osama bin Laden, and they crashed silver down, again, using paper shorts. This is a key factor I think people need to do. People assume that, silver's traded, like there's big blocks of silver going from miners to the exchange to the end users. No, that would be a nice, legitimate way of trading silver, but that's not how it works. It's thousands of contracts per physical ounce traded on high algorithms, trading, inside out, to the point where I think the total amount of mined silver that comes out of the ground, every year globally, not even the stuff that's traded at the COMEX where the price is really set, not all of that ever even goes in there, is the total global amount of silver mined every year is probably about $14 billion. So if you added up every miner, and put it out, it was probably about $14 billion annually. So I read an article, I can't remember if it was the Financial Times or Bloomberg, but said that they were changing the way that they were setting the silver fix, and that the estimated notional value of all the computer digital trades of silver was $5 trillion a year. Mm-hmm. And that blew my mind. These guys are investing, looping through $5 trillion a year on this $14 billion little teeny micro cap metal to keep it down, because they never cover the short. And anytime the price of silver rises, they throw on future promises of wealth, these contracts, and then crash it and force the people who are speculating on the upside position out. And then they get to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And it will never end until there's an actual physical shortage of physical silver and people stand up and say, hey, I don't want these paper receipts of silver. I need the real stuff. And then what do you think companies like, say, $1 trillion Apple market cap company is going to do when a vital strategic asset that funds billions of dollars worth of profits and all this other stuff physically becomes not available? What do you think that's going to do to the price of silver? And then if you think Apple's going to do that, what about Google, Facebook, Samsung, General Motors, IBM? What do you think nations like China, Russia, the United States, Japan, Korea, who are, like their whole way of life is dependent on these, industrial technological uses. And here comes a rare commodity that now, oh, hello, humanity is on the verge of extinction. What do you think that's going to do to the value of silver? And yet it sits here at $14 an ounce. Really?
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because the paper markets were, basically the manipulation, as far as I'm concerned, begins and ends, because that's where they really affect it. Yeah. And there's leverage. There's a certain amount of leverage for, paper versus the actual physical metal. Now, the two sources that I know of, one is on the U.S. debt clock, and I know you've shown that in videos before, where they're saying the leverage is 180 to 1. However, then you've got, I believe his name is Andrew McGuire out of London, saying that because you remember now, after Brexit, silver went up quite a bit in 2016. It almost hit $21, if I remember right. And then it went down very, very hard from, it was October 1st to December 18th. Silver took a massive hit. Andrew McGuire came on and did an interview on King World News and said that there was 41% more future contracts added to the market, not sold into the market, but added to the market. So he thinks the leverage is 520 paper ounces to every physical ounce held by the COMEX. I was curious if you have any better information, because we have two. Okay.
No, I don't.